Welcome back. It's Tim and Julie Harris, and we've got another great podcast for all of you today. And Julie, what is the topic of today's show?
Well, the topic of today's show is, are you stuck on the market? The truth about why your listing won't sell.
That's right. And so this is a good time for you and I, Julie, to talk about an article or actually a podcast we listened to on Housing Wire.
Yes.
And let's just give them the summary of what it is, because I'm sure it's going to manifest into a bunch of other headlines in the real estate realms. Okay. So
Yes.
let's just talk about it real quick, and then we'll go to our topic. Is that okay with
Well,
you?
actually, it was two things. It was it was a Daily Wire. It wasn't a Housing Wire. It was
Oh,
a
that's what I meant to say.
Daily
Yeah.
Wire podcast, morning podcast for today. And they were also referring to a Wall Street Journal article, which I did read this morning. And the topic was the same, which was they were predicting a housing crash.
Okay, so let's talk through the points, and we're going to tell you what they said as much as Julie and I can remember it, because we didn't prepare for this little section. But it's worth noting because I'm sure it's going to be making all the headlines of all the normal mainstream media. Okay,
Yeah.
so the thesis is that in some markets, the housing is overpriced to the point where it's making it so that they were totally focusing on first-time buyers couldn't purchase a home. Now,
Mhm.
I don't doubt that that's true. So let's just start out with the assumption that we believe that that's true. There's a lot of places in the country where it's just simply too expensive to buy than it is to rent. But here's the thing that you got to keep in mind. That's always been true. If you go to many of the major cities around the world, you can't afford to buy, you rent forever. I mean, I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing. And I am,
But it's
definitely
a fact.
it's a fact. So let's just start out with the fact that sometimes the area you want to buy a house in is too expensive and you can't afford it and you should move. I mean,
Buy
that
somewhere
should
else.
exactly, just because you live in a particular expensive area and you can't afford to buy a home, it's because you should be renting or you should be thinking about moving someplace where you can, so let's just start out with that premise. You're not entitled to a home just because you happen to live in a really expensive zip code. I wish you were.
Or because you want to live in that zip code, right? Yeah,
Exactly. All right. So
that's
let's
right.
start out with that. Now, the
Mhm.
secondary thought that they had was that some of the hottest markets are going to potentially be some of these markets that are going to supposedly crash. Now, in this Morning Wire, thank you, Julie, article, he didn't specify what the word crash meant. And of course, the word crash is going to get the most clicks and headlines. He just said what he was referencing was he was confusing, and this happens a lot from non-housing people. They conflate the word price reduction with loss in value. And it's so asinine every time I hear some guru talking about the fact that, oh, in Austin, Texas, they're lowering the prices. And, that's somehow loss in value. That is not loss in value. That is just basically an aspirational seller essentially resetting their expectations to what the market's, the buyer's
Right.
expectations. That's all it is. It happens all the damn time. You have a product, you put it for sale and it doesn't sell, you lower the price. It didn't necessarily lose value. You just had to lower the price to find where the market was. That's all.
Or decide not to sell it. That's
Yeah,
okay too.
exactly.
Right.
Exactly. But then
Well, and let me jump in just for a second. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but towards the end of that podcast, he did throw out, and I'm still thinking about it. He threw out a projection that some of those previously most hot markets, Austin being probably the top of the list, that he was expecting a 30 to 50% reduction in price. Now, that would be a crash by all metrics. But remember that this guy, I think his last name was Bonino. I have to look that up. But he was not a housing person. He was an economist. And as our friends over at Housing Wire often point out, that when you take the housing advice or housing projections from an economist versus from somebody who studies and analyzes housing specifically, that you often get different projections, okay? Because they're looking at it surely as an asset class, and if all the prices go up, as a stock might go up, then of course it has to come down because those are the laws of the economy. So I think certainly there has been some price adjustment, and I do, being that I'm licensed in Texas, I do watch that market pretty closely, and we have rentals there. It has adjusted, but to your point, that's just aspirational pricing adjustment down to where it has settled in. I think the other issue is that there's a whole generation basically of agents and mortgage people and brokers and even economists that had set this expectation that we'd always have this crazy appreciation that we saw during the pandemic years. And that was an outlier and that was unusual. And some of the pricing, I've had coaching clients that have this example where the seller will argue with them that because in the past, 4 or 5 years on average, their house has gone up by 20%, that, in 2024, that's another year we're going to add 20%. Well, that's ignoring the comps, right? So I think expectations are being managed is how I
Well,
would look at it. I'm interested. What do you have to say about that?
Well, it's the difference between inflation and appreciation, right?
Yeah.
So what homes have been doing is they've been keeping up with the inflation rate. That's really what's been happening. So everything else is getting more expensive, and along with real estate. So housing costs have gone up. So the reason that the inflation been in housing isn't really reported like you'd think it would be is because the government has this little really bizarre equation to figure out whether there's too much inflation in housing called the owner's equivalent of rent. And we've
Yeah.
talked about this in the podcast before because it's so bizarre. But the gist of it is that there's a group there, I guess the Fed or somebody calls a bunch of rando homeowners and asks and I'm not making this up. You guys you should
It's
Google this.
bonkers.
It's bonkers. So they're not looking at to see what the actual inflation is on real estate or rents or whatever. This is how they do it. So is there too much inflation in real estate? We're going to basically call a bunch of people who own homes and we're going to ask them what they think or what they would pay per month for their house and rent. That's the whole thing.
I
And
know. Makes
I
no
don't know if
sense.
I don't know if they call the same people every time or different people, but if you just, it's exactly what I just said. I'm not oversimplifying it. Research it yourself. It's called owner's equivalent of rent. And that's how they go about ascertaining whether or not there's too much inflation in housing. It's just totally crazy. But a couple other things back to this economist, not housing guy. And again, these are going to be the headlines that you guys are going to be dealing with when you're talking with your buyers and sellers. Oh, there's a big housing crash happening. Okay. All right. So let's
Mhm.
get into this. I'll give you guys we could talk forever why that guy was 100% wrong about a housing crash. Is there going to be some price corrections correlated to the lack of demand because there's oversupply? Oh, I just said it. Like in Austin, yes, there's too many homes that have been built, and obviously there's not enough demand to meet supply, and there's going to be price reductions. But his synopsis or his conclusions were not grounded in any sort of realities. For example, why didn't he talk about demographics? Right? Well, he said the average, and I've never heard this before, and I don't know if you researched this yet, Julie. The average age of a home buyer is 55. Okay, but he was bouncing, I believe that's maybe true, but he was also bouncing around when he was trying to make his point between the average, like he was talking about first-time home buyers, and then he said the average age of a home buyer is 55. So what he was trying to do in a very manipulative way is
Yeah.
say that the average first-time home buyer is 55, which is bullshit. It's not true.
Mm.
Okay, so again,
Yeah.
you
He's mixing
watch.
facts.
He is.
So,
And you
so I believe that the average age of people closing lately could be in their 50s,
No,
but the
no. Yeah,
average,
yeah.
but the
Closing.
average first-time buyer, we have reported on this quite frequently when we talk about the sky is not falling. I think is like 38.
Yeah, I
So,
agree.
so yeah, you have to kind of follow the breadcrumbs and not mix the facts. And yes, I can tell you from my own coaching calls, a lot of what's closing right now is in the upper end, and it is cash deals. That doesn't mean that the world is ending. That just means that's what the market is doing right now.
Well,
It's a typical correction.
let's go to the next thing he didn't talk about, Julie. He really did not talk about interest rates. I mean, interest rates are falling, and I want everyone to realize that Julie and I are techno optimists. We're definitely optimistic about virtually everything. And so, take it with a grain of salt the way we approach life, but it's worked for us. And so, if you look at, for example, interest rates, they've gone down. And in some markets, for example, we'll just stay focused on Central Texas, you're seeing an increase in inventory that's, 20, 30%. Interest rates going down, huge number of people that are on the sidelines that want to purchase homes. And now you add to it the fact that interest rates are falling. You're going to see an enormous uptick in home sales, and we're going to see what we lacked in, I think, January and February in terms of closings, and really arguably December. We're going to see an enormous increase in the home sales, and it only makes sense. We have pent up demand. We have essentially people waiting for homes to come for sale. Inventory's increased, and now we have interest rates that are lowered, making the payments less. And so this is the ultimate conclusion of the guy's article, why we think it's mostly bunk. Yes, when you see price reductions, that's not the same thing as property values falling. A property value would be what the person had paid for it when they bought it. Okay. So like back in 2000, back in the housing crash, those were property values. Someone closed at 300,000 and then 6 months later, the house was worth 250,000 and 225,000. Okay. That's definitely property
That's
values
different.
falling. A seller pricing their house at 300,000 where the true market on the house is 275. And then all of a sudden, oh God, look at the price reductions in Austin, Texas. Now we've had to reduce things to 279.9. It should have been at 279.9 to begin with. It's
Right.
called aspirational pricing. But here's what I'm the last point, little sub point about this, Julie, that I wrote down. Lower interest rates, which are on the way, which are going to come from what we are piecing together, will be an enormous Trump announcement about housing. We have seen little bits and pieces and breadcrumbs, and they're leading us to believe there's going to be an enormous announcement. And Julie, you found out, you did actually some homework on this and found out there was some program that was talked about, then they stopped talking about it. It had a really good name. I don't know if you remember it.
I don't remember right now.
Yeah. But yes, so the moral of the story is that we're going to see, and we expect very much there to be a big announcement. Again, this is our opinion, pure guessing here, but it's, if you do your own homework, listen to our past podcasts. Fannie and Freddie are going to be released from conservatorship. You're going to see a lot of new mortgage products go down. You're going to see interest rates fall, not increase, Mark Zandi. So interest rates are going to fall. You're going to see PMI greatly reduced, if not completely go away. You're going to see more competition for Fannie and Freddie. So the big banks are going to get into the same business that Fannie and Freddie are. The average Fannie and Freddie loan adds, I think it was 50 basis points. Like, so every time someone does a Fannie and Freddie loan, backed loan, it's costs 50 or something like, I think it was 50 basis points. Maybe I'm wrong, but anyway, I don't have it. I didn't research this, but
Not nothing.
it's
Yeah.
not nothing. So all the costs associated, and we always bemoan the first-time home buyer. The first-time home buyer is overpaying, and by an enormous margin because of the fact that Fannie and Freddie are in conservatorship. And for those of you guys who are thinking, and I know some of you think this, and I don't disagree with you, that the GSE is government service enterprises. They shouldn't be government backed anymore. Well, I got good news for you. Fannie and Freddie, once released, it was Moody's, I think, had already said, or one of the credit scoring things. This is totally wonkish, but still worth for the two people that understand what I'm talking about. The credit ratings for Fannie and Freddie won't be reduced, even if they're not, even if they're not, isn't a implied guarantee by the government. Moral of the story is we believe that what we're going to see happen sometime in the next 90 days. Conservatorship is the Fannie and Freddie are privatized again, a huge flood of new types of mortgages, lower interest rates. Fannie and Freddie are going to buy mortgage-backed securities. That's going to create a mortgage market again. You're going to have other banks. JP Morgan already said they want to do it. They're going to start buying mortgage-backed securities. The whole market is going to loosen up. Interest rates are going to fall. The 10-year, we've already seen that's essentially becoming more compliant for the sake of lower interest rates. And there's all kinds of new housing programs that we know are going to be. Julie and I, we talk with the different various people we know in the different, housing thises and the others that work for the government. And they're all readying themselves for a lot of new initiatives to build housing. Build, baby, build is what you're going to start hearing.
That's right.
That is our prediction. And I want you to hold us accountable to it if we're wrong. And I want you to sing our praises from the highest mountaintop when we're right, because I know we are.
Yeah, well, and just in the past week or so, rates have come down, and a lot of reporting is out there. I think there will be quite a bit more this week. That just getting into, I think they're like 6.7, 6.5, 6.75 in there. Just getting that much under 7 has increased mortgage applications by nearly 20%, and they should, as you said, come down from there. And the other thing that really, this will be my last thing, because that thing we listened to this morning kind of pissed me off, I guess. He was talking, we all go back to the first time buyer matrix, and they're the ones getting screwed. And in many ways, that's true because of the affordability crisis and all that. Okay, that's fine. But not once did he mention anything about what you were talking about, builders. I just got another email from one of the builders that said the builders offering down payment assistance. And they're paying, this particular builder email was paying 5% to the buyers, the buyer's agents, down payment assistance, all kinds of special programs. And don't forget, when these, especially the economists are talking about this, they always say, well, how can anybody afford to save a 20% down payment on an average sale price of $400,000? Okay, I get that. But you can also get a mortgage for 5% down if you have decent credit and a job. Nobody ever talks
Julie,
about that.
But Jill, you just touched on it. That's the exact thing. There's something that is going on in mainstream media, old media, where they're trying to discourage people from being homeowners. Because if you're hearing all this bad
Yeah,
information come out about how the cards are stacked against you as a homeowner, you're probably just going to get frustrated and not even do a real estate transaction, might even stay renting. It's
yeah.
like it's counterintuitive that there would be some kind of semi-organized group of people who share this thought that it's better for people to not own real estate, not own a home. And by the way, the amount of net worth that someone accumulates over their a lifetime being lifetime renters
Sure.
versus lifetime owners,
Uh-huh.
it's incredible. And I don't know what it is. Julie and I've tried to have these conversations with other people before, why some people just are not wanting people to want to buy homes. I mean,
I think they just don't think it through, to be honest with you, because it's not just better for the homeowner. It's also better for the economy. There's lots of reports that show how much people spend once they purchase a home. It's like I think the average over the first 2 years they own it is like $20,000 in improvements and upgrades and furniture and this and that and landscaping and the whole nine. It's better for the economy too. The reason that we're spending time on this, listeners, is because you're going to be spending time on this with your
yep.
buyers, with your sellers. They're going to read headlines. They're going to say the buyers are. Here's my prediction over the next couple of weeks. Buyers are going to say, "Oh, I heard that the market's going to crash. I'm going to wait to buy." And the sellers, maybe we will see quite a bit more inventory because maybe they'll want to sell before it actually crashes, which of course isn't going to happen. So to that, I would say, what's wrong with more inventory? Isn't that what everybody's been whining about for the past nearly a decade is that we don't have enough inventory? And in many markets, there's still a 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 ratio of offers to sales. So there's clearly demand. Are there areas that are oversaturated? Yes, absolutely. That's true. And if you're an agent that's selling in that area and you don't have your buyers in contract, you no longer really have an excuse. You can't find them something to buy. So I would go to the obvious buyers who are pre-approved, ready to rumble, or all cash. You need to prioritize that because you do have stuff to sell them. And then I would be looking at expired inventory and calling 100% of the expireds. Some of them are going to lose their will to sell. They don't want to reduce their price. That's fine. Maybe they don't have to sell. But the ones who are selling for reasons that they're just not going to keep the house, why aren't you taking those listings? To me, I think it's wall-to-wall opportunity, but I'm an optimist.
So listen, we have notes for the podcast we're presenting to you guys today. And if you want the notes from today's podcast, please just simply go to harrisrealestatedaily.com. Go to harrisrealestatedaily.com and subscribe. It takes you 2 seconds. Excuse me, we're still getting over influenza A. Sorry. And so if you want the newsletter, just go to harrisrealestatedaily.com. There's a link below. Drop in your email address. And remember, you have to double opt in. So then you have to go to your own email and you have to subscribe. But all the notes from all of our podcasts are there waiting for you. And we also have a lot of exclusive content. Julie and I have been doing a lot more, I would say, more technical writing and putting that on the newsletter because of the fact that there's a lot of you who are feeling overwhelmed by the amount of misinformation and mixed information where it doesn't really make sense. And so what we're doing is we're doing like what we did on the start of today's show, where we're trying to give you the way to cut through the malaise and the bad information with facts. Because as Julie just said, you're going to be dealing with a lot of people that have their heads full of bad information. And so as a result of that, you're going to have to know what to say and how to say it. So we're teaching you guys how to do that, obviously, on this podcast. But really, it all comes back down to knowledge equals confidence and ignorance equals fear. So your clients are going to, in some of these markets, be fearful. You're going to have to basically countermand that with some actual honest to God knowledge and some facts. That is available for you at harrisrealestatedaily.com. All right. And that is, again, our daily newsletter. Julie, let's get into the first point and let's remind them what the title is.
All right, stuck on the market, the truth about why your listing won't sell. All right, so today we're going to talk about maybe not all 6. We'll see how our timing works out. But there are 6 specific reasons. And yes, price is one of them, but it's not the only one that are probably causing your listing to sit on the market. So here's a fact. Homes are either selling immediately or they're sitting on the market for 30, 60, or even 90 days. That's exactly what we just talked about. Depends on where you are and what the house is. So don't let your listing expire and don't get fired. Be the listing agent when it sells. And before we examine all the factors, let's keep it real. Of course, price is one thing that overcomes all of the underlying reasons that a listing isn't selling. However, it's also true that the fastest way to get yourself fired from the listing is to always or only make it all about price. Does that make sense to you?
level off there. So when you
Yep.
hear about protract 30, 60, 90 days in the market, you just got to hit delete, delete, delete about all your previous knowledge about homes selling themselves overnight. All of you, most of you have already come to the realization that 30, 60, 90 is kind of normal, but it's actually not. A 90 day on the market is considered a balanced market. When you pass 140 days traditionally, that's when it starts becoming more of a buyer's market. You guys might be in some of your markets experiencing what is a buyer's market, but not your market on a whole, because you got to be clear in your head. A, there's no national real estate market, and B, your real estate market isn't one big, holistic market. You can have markets in your market, submarkets, right? Where
Yeah.
you're going to have certain streets that are depreciating, certain streets that are appreciating. By depreciating, I mean they're getting price reductions. Certain areas that are starting to feel the effects of new construction. You're going to have to know what housing developments and what housing styles are trendy and which ones aren't. So you've got to be a real good expert at knowing what the nuanced differences are about your market. So there is no one unified market. There's no one unified market locally or nationally. Now, that said, when I hear protracted days in the market, and Julie just touched on it in her notes, you should be excited about that. And the reason is because it creates more opportunity for more buyers to enter the market. And at the same time, it creates more opportunity for you to learn how to be an expired listing agent. So when you hear things that sound, maybe your first instinct is that sounds bad, it's not, because there's always a flip side to the coin. Like in real estate, okay? Here's the thing I also want you to think about. I'll tell you guys a story. So I had a friend of mine, and this was back a long time ago, he was probably at the time in his mid 30s, and he was making a lot of money in the stock market. And I remember this was one of the real estate corrections that happened in the early 90s after the tech bubble. And I remember running up against him, meeting up with him someplace and asking him how it was going, knowing full well that the stock market had just taken a back seat or just all these bad things, all the headlines, right? And he was in a great mood. And I asked him, so what's going on in your world that you definitely just
How is
had,
it that you're optimistic, right?
not just optimistic, he was really happy.
Yeah.
I'll never forget his reaction. He said, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "Well, didn't the stock market just go down?" And he goes, "Yeah, Tim, but you forget. I get paid when people buy or where they sell, no matter what direction the market's going. I get paid no matter what happens to stock values. My income is increases when people are fearful of the market going down, and increases when they're fearful of the market going up, FOMO, and they want to get in the market." He said, "I don't like a stable market. I like market where there's a lot of volatility."
Mm,
And
yeah.
I never forgot that, because the truth is that in the real estate business, we get paid whether the value of the house or the seller price of the house goes up or it goes down. So you are in a blessed market and a blessed industry. So don't get fooled into believing that there's not opportunities no matter what direction the market's going. All right, Julie, let's get back to task.
Yes. Well, so we talked about making sure that price isn't the only thing that you're talking about. And for that reason, in Premier Coaching, we have something called the listing evaluation tool that you get when you sign up for Premier Coaching. You can go to premiercoaching.com. You can get that right away. And it's going to talk about, we're doing, again, the 30,000 foot overview of that. But this is taken from the listing evaluation. So there's 6 factors that make a home sell. Your job is to rate each of these on a scale of 1 to 10, and you'll know what you need to do do the work to get it sold. A perfect score is 60 because there's 6 things that make a house sell. But if your listing isn't selling, it's not going to score that high. So look at the things that you score low on. And in many cases, it's not just one thing. So for those of you who have listings, think about each listing as we go through this. And then Tim told you how to get the notes as well. And then you can also use this as you're going on your next listing appointment to have it in the back of your mind as you're making your assessment. How sellable is your next listing? So the first one, of course, is condition. When there's little competition and more buyers than sellers to go around, conditions matter less. As more listing inventory arrives on the market, especially if any of it is new construction, because that always looks and smells great, the pressure increases to present your listing in its best light. So even if you're the only home for sale in the MLS code that it's in, you still owe it to your sellers to help them stage it to get the best results. They'll sell faster, they'll sell for more money, you'll be happier, they'll be more happy. So rate your listings condition on a scale of 1 to 10. But how do we do that? What makes your condition rating low? Any or all of the following, and you guys can send in some comments if you'd like to add to this.
Julie,
We're
hold
not
on.
going to be super gross here, but we can fill in the blank. Go ahead.
Okay, so where are you going to use these notes? You're going to use these notes everywhere. You're going to, Julie, I just sent you a comment too, if you can read the comment in chat. It's down below. If you go to the chat on the
Let me
Zoom.
switch screens here. Yeah.
Okay, no problem. All right, so the reality of it is these notes from today you guys can use when doing valuations on your own listings. You can do this, you can use this information. Frankly, this would be fun to use, especially Julie's initial points about some of the grosser things. You can use those points on social. It'll certainly get a lot of people's attention. So make sure that you are actually considering, how to use this information. It's great for you to listen. I love how you guys love the motivation you feel from the podcast. By the way, have you ever wondered why you feel motivated? It's not like Julie and I are trying to motivate you. It's not like we're giving you a big rah pep talk. It's because we're giving you knowledge and you're feeling yourself becoming more confident. And that's confidence that's making you feel more motivated. Because Julie and I want to lead with action, lead with knowledge. And then isn't it interesting how you start to feel more confident and you start feeling more motivated and optimistic? So as you're going through and listening to these points, I want you to be thinking about, okay, this is good for me, but how can I use this? How can I take this information and how can I actually multiply the benefit it is to you, right? All right, so Julie, let's roll in.
Yeah. So how do you come up with a rating for your condition, right? Any or all of the following will reduce your score on condition. Questionable smells, or possibly worse, unidentifiable smells, or identifiable smells but gross: cat pee, dog poo, curry, cigarette smoke, cigar smoke. We talked on a previous podcast about investing in an air ionizer you can get from Amazon to remove and maybe remove the carpet or furniture, anything that's holding those weird smells in. Bugs, mold or mildew in the bathrooms, the kitchen, the basement, rodents, evidence of rodents, dirty floors, clutter-covered countertops. These are all bad condition things. Crusty-looking appliances, dirty window screens, terrible or boring curb appeal, dead grass, green pool, weeds, all of that kind of stuff. And the list can go on. But if you have any, and hopefully not all of those things, you can't rate the condition a 10, right? Maybe it's a 5. Maybe it's okay, but it's not got great curb appeal. So that's condition.
Julie, let's
Yeah.
drop in
Go
here.
ahead.
So you said some things which I agree with, but you maybe out of context, it sounded insensitive. All right.
Sure.
So you said curry, for example. So curry to some people is going to be like, oatmeal cookies or vanilla cookies are to, some people.
Comfort smell. Mhm.
Exactly. So just because you find the smell foreign or maybe even offensive doesn't mean that the owners of the house do, because
Right.
obviously they don't. They've just gotten used to it. So make sure you're careful that you do not offend somebody and aren't, you're basically finding yourself, trying to be overly truthy with them about your opinion, but you might end up talking yourself out of the listing. And so again, as we're going through these notes, make sure you are considering how you can actually present this to your prospective sellers, especially if you have one or all of these items as issues. And what I would do is I would literally print this list off and I'd give it to them and I tell them to rate themselves, because then it's going to open up their mind. It's going to open up their minds to really what we've been talking about. So Julie, give me a second. I have to pause for a second. All right, we had to take a quick sneeze break. Julie and I are still getting over our influenza A. This is the first year, and I don't know how many years where we didn't get the flu shot. And of course, the first year, and I don't know how many years we didn't get the flu shot. We both get the flu.
Yeah. Paying
Yeah,
the price.
paying the price. That's right. All right, so Julie, what was the next point?
Okay. Point number 2. Again, we're talking about the things that cause a house to sell, and we're rating those on a scale of 1 to 10. Excuse me. So number 2 is location. Now, you can't change the location, so just rate it on a scale of 1 to 10. A low rating for a house that maybe backs up to the freeway or sits at an intersection with a stop sign or lights shining in the front of the house. A low rating would be for a scary neighborhood, possibly, or maybe there's a hoarder house next door. Something is making the location not great. Maybe it's in the flight path or near a busy railroad crossing. And a great neighborhood is a safe neighborhood, tree-lined sidewalks. It looks beautiful and everybody wants to live in that neighborhood. And make a note that on both of these first points, of course, price overcomes everything. So what do you do if maybe you have a listing and you would rate it a 3 on the location scale? It has a power tower in the backyard and a stop sign in the front, and it's got tons of road noise. It's a beautiful home, but you can't rate it a 10. You can't even rate it a 5 on location. So anytime the point of what we teach in Premier Coaching with this listing evaluation is anytime one of these is low, you're going to have to price accordingly. And sometimes you can fix it. Like the first point, maybe you can fix some of that. But second point, location, you can't change that.
Let's talk about that. So first of all, there's you have to do your best to be objective when you're going through this analysis. And I'm only laughing. I'm laughing at myself because I loved taking listings so much. It was really the only thing about real estate I really loved. And I loved, setting the appointment. I loved pre-qualifying a seller. I loved competing for the listing. All the things. And then by the time I got to the seller's house, I had lost all my objectivity about everything.
Yeah.
And so it could have horrible location and condition and the whole thing. And I would still not necessarily see it for what it was because I was just so excited to take the listing. That feeling never changed in my entire career, which is, I think, kind of neat. But moral of the story is that this questionnaire thing, Julie and I originally designed to keep both of our emotions between the lines so that we could be objective as we possibly can. And I'll tell you right now, the person that's going to be the least objective about any condition issues or location issues or price issues, that's going to be the seller. So when you're dealing with getting a seller, I'm going to give you guys an overarching script. I think this influenza A is going to try to make me sneeze here in a second. All right. So Mr. Seller. So here's the thing. In real estate, the sale of a home, the sellability of a home comes down to three things: price, condition, and location. And you know what, Mr. Seller? So I've got three quick questions for you. So the location of your house, well, we can't really move it, right? So it's facing the east and the sun sets in the west. And, it isn't where it is in the neighborhood. And yes, we had to have a utility easement in the backyard. Okay. And yes, we can hear freeway noise when the wind is blowing a certain direction, but the location is what the location is. So we can't change that. Now, so that's the only thing. Good news, Mr. Seller, is that your location is, it's good. The bad news is some people will find some of those other things about the location. They'll find them objectionable and they might not be interested in the house as much as they would otherwise would have been. Now, I'm going to tell you how you can offset location, Mr. Seller, is that we can make the condition really good. Now, condition's a tricky bugger though, because with condition, it's condition of the showability of the house, too much furniture, redecorating is needed, more landscaping, the list of things that Julie just gave you guys with regards to smells and whatnot. So there are those condition issues. But sometimes, and this is me rolling back into talking to a seller. So Mr. Seller, the issue is that we have as far as condition goes, you have great condition. Landscaping is fantastic. You've done a great, I ran my finger on the top of your hot water tank, Mr. Seller, in the basement. There was no dust on it. You've done a really terrific job taking care of the house. But your house is a 3-bedroom with a loft, and we're in a 4-bedroom neighborhood. And we can see, and I can show you this when it comes to pricing, houses that are 3 bedrooms with lofts. I like them personally. I love the idea of having an open office or something like that, but we're in a 4-bedroom neighborhood. And we can see when we get to pricing, which is the next thing, that sometimes 3 bedrooms with lofts are not, essentially selling for the same value as houses that are true 4 bedrooms. Now we can talk about making the loft into a bedroom and all of that. And I've got a solution for you on that if that's what you're interested in doing. But what I'm suggesting is the location is what the condition is what the condition is. We've got a 3-bedroom with a loft. Fortunately, there's not a long list of things for you to do. I want you to tighten some door handles and, fix some paint on a couple walls and things like that. But other than that, nothing. So the last thing is the price. So Mr. Seller, we can't do anything about the location. And really, unless we're willing to, do a huge housectomy, we're not going to do anything about the condition. And so the only other thing we can have a positive influence on is the price. Right? So that's ultimately how you are going to learn how to present to a seller. Now, I'm going to give you guys a couple of nuanced approaches to this. When you're dealing with a seller, you've got to remember you're dealing with someone who is in a state of peak emotional stress. And it doesn't even matter if they're an investor, but an investor lesser so in the point I just made. But a homeowner, peak emotional stress, I promise you. So you're going to have to be very sensitive to that, and you're going to have to be very, very sensitive to using trigger words. Trigger words would be lowering the price. You never say lower the price to a seller. You say reposition the house on the market to correctly reflect the market's expectations. You never say your house is, has some condition issue. We give you guys lots and lots of things to say to make it so that the seller, you're not going to offend the seller. Now, I'm not telling you to not be honest with the seller about price, condition, location. What I'm telling you is to have better bedside manner. Essentially a doctor is going to be a great doctor, whether he can actually perform the procedure successfully, but he's not going to have the opportunity to perform the procedure successfully because no patients will want to work with him if he's got horrible bedside manner and if he comes off insensitive, right? So you have to be the same thing. You have to be somebody that's able to take into consideration the heightened state of stress this person is feeling, probably their lack of objectivity when it comes to price, condition, location, and then approach it like that. And then you're going to start developing that certain special je ne sais quoi in the marketplace that other people are envious of and don't even understand why, why is Julie so special? What is it about? It must be her marketing, or it must be she has all these inside connections from the church she goes to. Well, all those things might be true, but the real reason is because she knows what to say, and she knows how to say something in such a way that the client's going to receive it in a positive way, which results in a positive outcome, which results in, well, a positive income too for Julie, but also it results in more repeat and referral.
Yes, very well said. And the other thing that you're talking about is it gets back to feedback once it's been on the market for a while. And a lot of agents are unaccustomed to getting feedback from each other because they live through a market where things sold themselves instantaneously. And I'm sure there's listeners right now that have never even asked for or given feedback. So
Let's
you can take it from the other agent as well.
Okay, but let's drill down on that. Okay. In
Mhm.
Premier Coaching, we have something in Premier Coaching. Julie, write this down to make sure. We probably need to update this. What it is something that you ask for the buyer and the buyer's agents, even at open houses, frankly, to fill out a real-time feedback form. We had a better name for it. I don't remember the name
Instant
of it.
feedback.
There you go, instant feedback. And it's going to be essentially this rating scale where the prospective buyer or the looky loo coming through an open house, is going to give ratings to the seller about all the condition issues, the location issues, the price issues, all the things. Now, why are you doing it that way? Because you need the seller to be objective. You're wanting them to see what the actual market said. Because unfortunately, a lot of times, if you have not approached the seller correctly and you've essentially stepped in a landmine of emotions, and they're now seeing you as adversarial to their dream of an aspirational price. You guys following me on all of this? So if you haven't approached the seller and you haven't, essentially, if you triggered the seller to the point where they see you as an adversary to getting the property sold, because after all, you're not in agreement with them about the price. So the psychology at foot here. This is the reason we teach you guys how to avoid all these landmines in Premier Coaching. But that's the benefit of leaving that instant feedback form, because then it's the marketplace giving them that feedback. It's the marketplace saying the house smells like onions. It's the marketplace saying that, the crocodile in the pool in the backyard is not really, it's cool and everything. I'm glad your crocodile's name is, Clark, but, not for us, that kind of thing. Make them laugh, point it out. And then I'll take this to the next level. There are some interesting services out there that will do digital feedback for you. They'll email, pester the buyer's agent until they get feedback. And that definitely works, but I would do that in conjunction. If Julie and I were selling real estate, I'll tell you one of the secret things we did is when we take a listing, we would ask the seller how they want their feedback. No feedback, limited feedback, or massive feedback. Now, massive feedback is that we had somebody that would call the buyer's agents, and we'd have them actually poll the buyer's agents about what their actual condition feedback was on the house. And then she would call the seller back and she'd give the seller the actual feedback. Now, here's the miraculous things that happen, all the side stream benefits that have happened from that. Number one, the negative feedback wasn't coming from Julie and I. The negative feedback was coming from somebody else. And the seller was totally receptive to it. And Janet was really good at doing this. And she would call them up and she'd be conversational and chatty and nice and all the rest of it. And she'd give them this feedback. And she had enough, she wouldn't be too jagged with the feedback, but she was telling them exactly what the buyer's agent said. And then she would sometimes, on accident, get the seller to want to do a price adjustment to compensate for the fact that they've heard for the third time in a row that the house needs, new landscaping or whatever. So she would actually cushion the blow of getting the house repositioned on the market to correctly reflect the buyer's expectations, aka lower the price. She'd make our job easier. But here's the other thing that happened. So let's say, for example, and this was not how we intended it, but this was the other thing that happened. Let's say there was an agent that was refusing to give feedback, never gave feedback, and she would call the buyer's agents 3 times and log the fact that she called him 3 times. Then she would call the seller back and she'd say, "That showing you had last Wednesday at 7 o'clock, I've called the agent 3 times. This is when I've called them. They've never called me back." Now, why is that going to be a benefit to you as a seller's agent? Because as a listing agent, because you are proving to the seller that you are going above and beyond to get feedback for them on that particular house. And you're giving them a little flavor of essentially what happens sometimes with regards to buyer's agents' behavior and the rest of it. And if you happen to be facing down a listing that's about to expire on you, chances are you're going to be able to keep that listing for longer or get an automatic extension. I'm going to take a sidestep. One of the things we teach you to do in Premier Coaching is we want you to have a listing contract. You have to put an end date on it. We want you to put listing contracts that have at least a year end date. Yes, you heard me say that right. And we teach you to do this in Premier Coaching. You're going to know how to go into a seller's house, and they're going to be more than happy. Yes, you heard me say it. Just sign a listing contract that lasts at least a year. And I don't want to get into the weeds now because Julie's gonna get mad at me for moving too far away from her notes. But you definitely want to join Premier Coaching. Why haven't you done it yet? We just are about to relaunch Premier Coaching and Premier Coaching 2.0. Do you know that we're including the ethical real estate professional designation with Premier Coaching 2.0? You've got to go over to premiercoaching.com and join Premier Coaching, or you can just click the link below. And the best news is, I think you'll agree, is that you can join Premier Coaching right now for free. You can pay nothing. Try it out for 30 days. You get full access to all the first level of Premier Coaching, including a daily semi-private coaching call. Now, a lot of you are going to automatically instantly see the value, and you're going to join Premier Coaching. You're going to become a VIP. All that information is on the website. Do not delay. Join right away. We know you love this podcast. It is, we're told the #1 daily podcast for real estate agents in at least the United States. If you love this podcast, you will not believe the value you get in Premier Coaching, especially now that we've added ethical real estate professional designation. So go ahead and check that out and do that right away. Julie?
All right, so our third part of getting a house sold is the number and frequency of showings that your listing's getting weekly. You can rate it on a scale of 1 to 10. If you have slow or no showings, according to the National Association of Realtors, you are likely to be about 10% overpriced. If you have consistent showings but no offers, according to NAR, you're usually 3 to 5% overpriced. You can rate your listing really high on the scale. If you're getting lots of showings and second showings, you're probably very close to selling it. But rate it low if nobody seems to know it's even on the market. Maybe you're going days or worse, weeks between showings. Okay. And again, that's an indication here of a price issue. So there's a difference between, a little overpriced and a lot overpriced. And one way that we gauge is how many showings. And again, I mean, I've had just coaching clients where they're like, it's been like 2 weeks since our last showing. First thing we do is we log into the MLS, make sure it's even still showing active. Maybe there's some glitch in the system, right? And that does happen sometimes. And then we look and we see if there's something wrong with the search, how it's entered in the MLS. Maybe something is causing it not to pop up where it should. Maybe you can actually massage your listing a little bit. But if everything looks perfect, your pictures are beautiful, your description is great, and it just seems like nobody cares, you might have missed the market regarding price by as much as 10%.
Well, okay. And we teach you guys how to explain this to the seller, but I'm going to tell you right now, do not have this conversation with the seller. You must have this conversation with the seller after the listing contract is signed, before the listing goes active. And this is the simple script you use, especially, we teach you guys how to price, when it comes to pricing in this market, is obviously a challenge. Sellers are all aspirational. Very rarely are you going to find a realistic seller. We give you the script, Mr. Seller, we can price this house and aspirationally and that's where all the sellers are going to be. We can price it at the top of the market. Now, and then you have to explain to them the risks and the perils of that, right? The benefit is they could get more than they think, but the risks are the house will stay on the market longer. And you need to learn how to express to the seller the dangers of that. Because statistically, Mr. Seller, the longer the house stays on the market, and you are going to have all this for Premier Coaching, the less it's going to sell for of its original list price, or it's actually going to sell for less than had we priced the house in the middle price range. So the top is the aspirational pricing. The middle price range is what the market's expecting, kind of what they expect based on the comps and what's currently for sale, and most importantly, what's sold. And then the bottom is going to be if you want to sell the house really quick and we can sell it to an investor. And then once they essentially have learned that most of them are going to want to price it either at the top or somewhere in the middle. Now, once they become expired, you'll find that all of them want to price it in the middle. And if they're really motivated, then they're going to want to price it somewhere at the top of the wholesale price and then the low end retail. But we teach you how to do this in Premier Coaching. But here's what's important. Mr. Seller, listen, I appreciate the fact that, the market might be telling us, not you, not your CMA, the market might be telling us that the house is worth $499. And I appreciate the fact that you feel the house is worth $525. And after having gone through the house, I can understand why you think that. You're right. Your landscaping is fantastic. It's decorated beautifully. It's in great condition. And you got a 3-car garage, and a lot of the other comps only have 2-car garages. So I'm with you. Let's go ahead and price this at $525. But we have to be on the same page that Mr. Seller, after 2 weeks or 10 showings, if we don't have a written verified offer on the property, 2 weeks or 10 showings, whichever comes first, Mr. Seller, then we have to agree to reposition the house on the market so that correctly reflects the buyer's expectations, right? Now, you want to say this before it goes active. Then you want to write it on the listing contract. You want to have them write it in their calendar that in 2 weeks, now when it goes active on the MLS, first day it's in the MLS, start on that day and then have the seller write in their calendar. Now, if it's you have to adjust that according. Like, for example, if you're in a marketplace where the house is, all the comps take 3 or 4 months to sell, or maybe they're strange, it's rural, it's something like that, adjust accordingly. But as a general rule, the 2 weeks or 10 showings thing is always going to make it so that the seller's getting their win, they're getting their aspirational price, you're getting the listing, but you're being honest about it. And you're explaining to them that after 2 weeks or 10 showings, if you don't have a written verified offer on the property, you're going to reposition it. Notice I did not say lower, reposition it on the market to correctly reflect the buyer's expectations. That is a Tim and Julie Harris original script from having done hundreds and hundreds of thousands of coaching calls, but it definitely will work and it'll keep the seller on your side. You do not want the seller to feel adversarial. Every time I talk to that Julie, all she wants to talk to me about is lowering the price. That's how you're going to get fired, for sure.
Yeah, that's right. That's why we have, all of these points in the podcast. It gives you more talking points. That's why we were talking about feedback. It prevents you from having that conversation. The only time I ever hear from you is you're begging me for a price reduction. The nickname in coaching for that is the seller's "What have you done for me lately?" call.
Yeah.
And they're always wanting that. We teach the 12-week communication plan. There's so many things that speak to maintaining the relationship long enough to make it to the finish line.
Well, Julie, our system that we teach them in Premier Coaching, what it does is it lays the expectation for the house to take longer than everyone hopes it'll sell. I mean, we give you guys a plan and a system to follow where we know what the seller is going to be thinking 2 weeks from now. We know what the seller is going to be panicking about 5 days after it's listed. We know we can see into the future, so you don't have to learn about what's going to happen. We've done this billions of times through coaching clients and personally. So what we've done is we've created a system, and so you're communicating with the seller, and digitally, it might be through a feedback assistant, it might be you calling them every Friday to just give them a market roundup, but you're anticipating, because we have told you what to anticipate, a slowing market, longer days in the market, more fear and loathing from the press, and that's going to position you so you get your price reductions, the seller still loves you, and frankly, you're the one that has the listing when the listing sells, which is the trick in this market, right? The trick of being a powerful listing agent is have the listing when it sells. Kind of an old stupid joke, but it's still true.
Yes, indeed. And that brings us to, of course, talking about price. Point number 4, we're going to analyze the price itself. Your current price versus the price of competing homes. So rate your listing. How do you decide whether it's a 10 or a 0? Well, a 10 is, if I look it up online and it seems to be well priced for the amenities, and we can't just go buy a new home around the corner for $15,000 more than your listing. A low rating is if you're obviously overpriced compared to the competition, like a 2-bedroom that's priced like a 3, or a no-car garage priced like it's a 2-car garage, etc. It has to make sense in the market. And here's the thing. You said it, Tim. It's hard to price in general. There's no exact technique to it. Even if you're an appraiser, they use lots of different methods. And because of that, you do have to look at all these different things. How does it stack up versus the competition? Take your listing hat off, put your buyer's agent hat on. If I'm out there showing that property, what am I showing it against? What are the 3 other homes that it's up against? And does your listing actually make sense? Or, and this does happen, are all the buyer's agents using your house to sell other houses because they're like, look at this one and look at that one. Doesn't this one look like a lot better deal for what it offers? And then you linger on the market. It can go either way for you, but it has to make sense.
Now, I want to point something out that should be obvious to all of you guys. The skill set you need to be a powerful listing agent is definitely higher, the skill set is, than working with buyers. There's no doubt. But that, again, is counterintuitive because you're thinking, well, why would I want to just work with buyers? It's because at the end of the day, you don't have any leverage. You are the leverage when it comes to working with buyers. You're the one giving up your nights and weekends. And remember, buyers can always change their mind to decide to stay renting, wait for interest rates to fall, wait for pigs to fly. Whereas when you're following our listing system as part of Premier Coaching, we're going to teach you how to go after the sellers that absolutely positively want to sell and that are going to result in a real estate transaction, you getting a paycheck. So you're going to have to really tune your mind to the realities of where the best opportunities are. And it's counterintuitive. Tim, why would I want more listings when the inventory is building? Because more listings is where it's at, because more money is always from being a listing agent. Nobody got into real estate just wanting to work only with buyers. And if you did, it doesn't take too many lost weekends and lost months and summers for you to realize you should have basically put all your best energies to being a listing agent. But it does require more skill. It does require more dedication, but it's worth it because there's less competition than there is when you're trying to get buyers to work with you. When you're a great listing agent and you have the skills that we teach you in Premier Coaching, you're going to discover quickly how ill-prepared most of your competitors are in a market that's changing, let alone one that's in some markets becoming a buyer's market. Be excited when other people are fearful. And be fearful when other people are too greedy, as Warren Buffett is famous for saying.
Yes, very well said. And, to me, having something sit on the market for a little while is really great for these guys, not forever,
Yeah.
not for, because take, for example, I have a coaching client in Phoenix. Okay. She's going to get one of her current listings sold this weekend. She's had 2 open houses while it's been on the market for about 30 days. She now has 3 new buyers, all of whom have houses to sell, and they're all right from that neighborhood. Listings generate business. Buyers don't necessarily. Excuse me. So let's get to our final point, number 6. I'm sorry, number 5. Number 5.
But number
sorry.
5, so number 5, you can catch up on your this flu is no joke, Julie. All right, point number 5, your seller's level of cooperation. Now that should be obvious, but bottom line is how easy was the house to show? How cooperative was the seller to fix? We always tell this story because you guys think we're making it up, but we're not. Julie actually had a coaching client who had a listing and they had a mini horse, a pony that they kept in the house. And of course, the feedback was the house smells like a barn. And the seller just didn't want to fix it because they just weren't in any particular rush to sell the house. They had a year or whatever. But sure enough, going back to the seller's level of cooperation, as they got closer to the seller needing to sell the house and being motivated, miraculously, the pony was all of a sudden living in a barn literally outside of the house. The house no longer stank. So, if you had the listing as the first listing agent when the seller wasn't that motivated, well, chances are you had a very uncooperative seller to fix the feedback issues that they didn't want to fix. Whereas if you had it the second time around, or if you had a motivated seller to begin with, then obviously you have a different level of cooperation. So do understand that the less cooperative the seller is, the lower the price that they're going to sell the house for, because the longer it's going to sit on the market. And so I'll tell you the best way to ferret out whether you're going to have a cooperative seller or not is when you're pre-qualifying them, and we give you our pre-qualification script in the Premier Coaching Program, obviously, is you're going to want to find out what their level of motivation is, what their time frame is. And all these questions are in the pre-qualification script. And if you find somebody, and you will find people who are just not that motivated, and they convince you that they're not that motivated because you ask the questions, you maybe don't want to take that listing because they're just going to waste your time, and they'll be happy to waste your time. And there's always going to be 1 in 20 sellers that are like that. Julie and I used to call them social sellers. Usually they're FSBOs. They have a beautiful garden. They love to have people come by and talk. So they'll put the for sale by owner sign in the yard. Usually they leave it out there for a month. Then they list it with a usually new real estate agent. Then they have more social interactions, and then they change their mind, and then it goes for sale again next spring. That happens in every market. It'll make you laugh when you see it happening in your market. Just don't let it happen to you. All right, Julie, let's go on to point number 6.
Yes. Okay. So we just talked about the seller's level of cooperation. You just alluded to number 6, which is their level of motivation. Is the seller only going to sell if they get their price, and they're actually saying that to you point blank? Is that price reasonable if you fix the other items on the list that we just discussed, or are they just flat out too aspirationally priced for the market? If sellers don't have to sell, they are far less likely to cooperate and adjust the price to reflect the market's expectations. So that's point number 6. Your job is to count up all of your scores. How far are you from a perfect score of 60? And which of these items do you score low on your current listings, or maybe the listing you're going to take this afternoon? It's unlikely that you have a 10 on all of them. All homes, even new construction, usually has something that needs to be corrected or massaged a little bit. But can you work on getting it closer to a 10? If there's things like the location, which you can't do a thing about, then your price had better be a 10. Does that make
Well,
sense?
no, it does. And you're reading my mind because really, Mr. Seller, at the end of the day, it comes down to price, condition, location. Remember, refer back to the script I gave you guys before. And so here's the thing, Mr. Seller. We can have one of those three things that are a little bit out of whack for the market. We can have, if you have superior condition and superior location, guess what? Your price can be a little high because the market will absorb it. But if your price is a little high and you have a location challenge based on the feedback, remember, you're not trying to make the seller adversarial towards you, then we're probably going to have something that's going to have experience a lot of resistance in the marketplace. So you can have one thing that's slightly out of whack, but you cannot have two when it comes to the price, condition, location matrix. And I promise you guys, if you learn some of these scripts when it comes to talking with sellers, and you have to learn the scripts. The script is a conversation outline, and that's all it is. It's not just you giving them a dissertation like in essence we're doing with you guys right now. It's conversational. That's how we've written all of our scripts. And when you deliver them the way that we intend for you to deliver them, we want you to memorize our scripts, then internalize our scripts, and then personalize our scripts. We want you to make our scripts your scripts. We don't just want you to say Tim and Julie's scripts. It's important that you memorize them first because the questions in the scripts are written in such a way to get you to a desired result. Then we want you to, so you want to memorize them first, then internalize them. It's one thing to understand the words. It's another thing to really think about them and understand the context of them and why Tim and Julie wrote the words in which they did and the questions in the order in which they did. And then we want you to personalize them. The mistake that most agents make is they just go right to personalization. I got Tim and Julie's script and I'm going to write my own. I'm going to make it better. Well, our script has been tested to work at all price ranges and all market conditions for decades. What makes you think you, who just got your real estate license, is going to do a better job at the script? And what's the point of even trying? Because if you know these scripts are going to deliver the desired result for you and the client, why would you bother trying to basically create something that's going to be in your mind better than what we'd created? I'm not saying that Julie and I are the end all be all of script writing. What I am saying is what we have done for you as part of Premier Coaching is we've created a very clear path up the mountain for you. It's up to you as to whether or not you want to follow it and how carefully you want to follow it. So Julie, any closing thoughts as we round the bend for these guys?
Well, I agree with you. Everything you said, it's not a time to be creative and try stuff out. You can lose a listing when you're trying things out, but it's also a bad time to be hiding out from having to learn these things because even in a normal market, which we're still not even in because most of the country still is not even at 2019 levels of inventory. But if we were, on average, even with best pricing comps and everything else, 33% of the time, a listing takes a price reduction before it sells. That's normal because pricing is not an exact science. And maybe what was priced really well today becomes not a great price tomorrow because something else came on the market and undercut your price. Now everything's changed, right? So it's normal to have price adjustment conversations both at the table in the first place when you're taking the listing, but also 30 or 60 or 90 days into it. That's normal. What you don't want to do is say, oh, I'm not going to deal with that. That's too stressful for me. That's too far out of my wheelhouse. It's not outside of your wheelhouse. If we could do it in our careers, you can do it in your careers. Our Harris certified coaches are there for you every single day to rehearse some of these things with you and to maybe analyze some of your listings and say, send me the MLS. I do that with coaching clients. Send me the MLS. Let's take a look at it. Looks like it's got a great pictures, great description. Tell me more about what's going on. Don't go through this alone and don't feel like you're just going to wait it out and everything's going to get great. And the other thing that you said, Tim, is that there is no national market. There's no even citywide market. You're going to take a listing today that sells overnight and you're going to feel like, okay, the market's fine. Everything's good. And then next week, you're going to take something and it's going to be like 4 or 5 days before you even get your first showing. You've got to be able to deal with both scenarios.
And build up as much inventory as you guys can. If you've been waiting around for you to become listing agents, I promise you it's never going to be, this is the best time we've certainly seen in the last 5 years because there's so much, consternation out there, because there's so many people that don't know what direction the market's going. Anytime there's fear like that, the greatest fortunes of men and women have always been made during the greatest times of change. We are, without a doubt, in a real estate recession. One could even argue a real estate depression. You know, a recession is defined by what, 2 quarters of GDP falling, and a depression is something that's even worse than that. We could easily argue right now housing's been in a depression for a long time. Become a listing agent. Put all your best efforts becoming a listing agent, because here's what's going to happen next. Interest rates are going to fall. There's going to be new mortgage products that become available. There's going to be all these buyers, and it doesn't matter whether they're first-time buyers, move up, luxury buyers, all the rest of it. All these buyers are going to rush back into the market. You're going to see the rekindling. I don't even know how to describe the emotions that I'm thinking as I try to express all this to you. There's going to be the biggest explosion in interest of housing that we've ever experienced in our lifetimes, based on the things that Julie and I suspect the Trump administration is going to be doing with housing. That's going to create so much momentum. If your mind is caught in the quagmire state that many of you guys are in, emotionally, you're not receptive to the new opportunities this marketplace is going to offer you, you're going to lose a year, 20, you're going to lose 2 years, 10 years, because you're going to have waited too long to make changes. And that's the reason that Julie and I are doing our best to keep you guys educated, motivated. It's ultimately up to you to get into action. The action that all of you must take is to join Premier Coaching. So go to premiercoaching.com or click the link below and join Premier Coaching. In the meantime, thank you for sticking with us through our influenza bout. We're almost better. We've been on Z-Pack for 4 days, Julie.
Yep.